Coach Stone Podcast.
Coach Stone Podcast here. This is episode number 5. I want to thank everybody listening to Coach Stone Podcast. I also want to thank JC Hawks Radio and JC Sports Network for letting me do this. I want to thank BJ for talking me into doing this. I kind of like it a lot. If you're a first-time listener to the podcast, let me tell you how the game plan is going to work. We're going to have a pregame. We're going to introduce our guest that's on the line right now. They're going to talk a little about themselves. Then we're going to have a kickoff question, a first drive question, and then we're going to have a halftime break, take a little water. After that, we're going to come back from halftime, get the ball back on a kick return question. We'll have our second drive, and then our guest will leave us with a 2-minute warning wisdom, and then we'll end the game. If there needs to be overtime, there will be overtime. But without further ado, what I'd like to do is to introduce my Coach Stone podcast guest, Wes Simmons from 3D Coaching. Coach, are you there?
I'm here, Coach. It's great to be on. Doing well.
Doing well. I know we tried to do this earlier during the day, but you know how it is with families. We can't do that. So, what I like to do, Coach, because a lot of our viewers, I think a lot of our viewers will know what the 3D coaching is. I mean, you guys got almost 23,000 followers, but I would like you to, if you don't mind, just give a little introduction about yourself. And then when we get done, we'll start the kickoff question. What is 3D coaching, if that's okay? So,
absolutely.
Coach, it's all yours.
I'm a husband. I'm a father. I coach to inspire athletes to pursue excellence in sports and in life while enjoying the process and embracing the journey. I've been an athlete at all, obviously the youth, middle school, high school, and then college level, where I really was able to see the power of the coaching platform firsthand in my own life. I had the opportunity to play at a small college in Northwest Missouri. If any of the listeners are familiar with small college football, you may be aware of Northwest Missouri State University. They've had a lot of success there. But the success that they've had there, in my estimation, is the result of a coach who really embodied what three-dimensional coaching is all about and created a culture. From there, I ended up pursuing a master's degree as a grad assistant there and began my coaching career. It was about year 3 that had some things change in my life, and I began to pursue not on-field coaching, but over the past, I guess it's been 18 years now, I've been working with coaches and athletes in different capacities while still maintaining connection as a coach at various levels. But right now I'm coaching my kids. I've got 4 kids. My wife is a coach of our daughter. I'm coaching my boys, and just trying to hold it all together in this crazy youth sport world while seeking to inspire coaches who do this professionally to do it a different way.
Well, that's awesome, Coach. Do me a favor before we start. Can you please tell the listeners the Twitter for 3D coaching? Because once we do this first question, we will go into in depth of what is 3D coaching, if that's okay. So do you have the Twitter for 3D coaching, Twitter handle?
Yeah, the handle is at 3D Coaches with an ES on the end, at 3D
okay.
Coaches.
Perfect. Here's the kickoff question, Coach. Ball's just kicked off. What is 3D coaching? I know a couple of years ago I was working at an event for a Youth Sports Foundation, and 3D coaching came. I even bought a book. I was presenting, and then afterwards you guys presented. You weren't there, I don't think, but there was one guy that I saw with the video that I just recently took a course of, and that's what made me want to bring you on the show, Coach. I really liked it, and I think, for example, myself, when I was a younger coach, I was more of a yeller and things like that, and, just reading the book, the Bobby Bowden book, I mean, it really touched my heart and things like that. But why don't you explain to our listeners, what is 3D coaching?
3D coaching, at its very essence, is a framework for coaching. That's the way we describe it. It's a framework. It's not a program. It's not a product that sits on a shelf and therefore has a shelf life. It's more helpful, I believe, to visualize 3D not as a product or a program that sits on a shelf, but it's a shelf. In fact, in a picture, if you were to imagine a bookshelf with 3 shelves, each one of those shelves in the picture will hold things. So that first shelf, and we use a pyramid diagram to help illustrate this, that first dimension or that first shelf is the fundamentals. It's the physicality of sport. If you're going to be a great coach, you better be great in the first dimension. You better have that shelf stocked with relevant and wise strategy. So at this level, we find things like strength, power, cardiovascular, speed, quickness, agility, tactics, repetition. There are 8 in the first dimension that we've identified that if coaches are going to be a great coach, they better be good there. It's the foundation of sport. Kids are first and foremost signing up for our programs because it's physical. So what 3D coaching is not is an attempt to just neglect the first dimension, focus only on the heart and mind, circle up, hold hands, sing 6 verses of Kumbaya and go and get our butts kicked. That's not what 3D is about.
I love it.
It's first and foremost physical. But we all know, those who have been in coaching long enough understand that sport, the best teams are made up not just of great athletes or what we would consider first dimension attributes, but there's something deeper, there's something more. So the second dimension, or that second shelf that we like to help coaches understand is this is the we call it, in our framework we use the word psychology, but sometimes that can be misconstrued as a bunch of big fancy words that don't mean a whole lot in the real world of coaching. So we try to keep it in the realm of applied psychology. In other words, so the research-backed strategies and wisdom that we've ascertained from really smart, sociologists and psychologists and all these people. But we try to put it right there where coaches can grasp it. Things like motivation. How do you motivate a kid today when it's all about the stuff? We call it extrinsic motivation. Kids are motivated to play sports in today's culture by what we like to describe as the 3 Ps: positional time, playing time, potential scholarship. Or it's all about the stuff. It's about the extrinsic rewards and trophies, or at the college level. It's more and more this arms race to build bigger and better facilities. None of this is wrong. It's not bad. But when those become the primary drivers of why kids are playing sports and parents are signing up their kids to play sports, the problem with extrinsic motivation is it's never enough. It always requires more and more and delivers less and less. So we try to help coaches develop some strategies to how do you motivate some kids from within. Confidence is a second dimension issue. We're living amongst we have a generation of kids right now that posture is really, in a lot of ways, the most confident generation ever, is the way it's presented, or the facade they put up. But it's very fragile in the face of adversity. So we like to tell coaches, what's your strategy to coach confidence when confidence is lost? Most coaches don't have strategy. We just say, be more confident. Or if it's a confidence issue, they try to fix it all in the first dimension, which they should. So if there's some issues going on with that, a kid could hit the curveball last year, or he could throw the down and out last year, but this year they're off. Okay, you have to fix what's wrong in the first dimension. But if it's a confidence issue, there's something deeper going on. Confidence isn't just about the skill set. It's about belief in the skill set. Skill set's first dimension. Belief isn't. That's something deeper. So coaches need to develop strategies to deal with second dimension issues in the second dimension. Emotions, team cohesion, goal setting. These are the types of things that if coaches don't have strategies for that, what happens is they tend to try to fix it all in the first dimension. For example, team cohesion. That's a fancy word for how do you get a group to come together and gel. Well, if a coach doesn't have strategies for that, you'll hear things like, okay, if we're not going to get along, we're going to run, which is a great, what we're doing there is applying a cardiovascular strategy to a relational issue. And we're always framing in terms of punishment. And I like to remind coaches, if that's your strategy for team cohesion, about the best you can hope for is to get the kids to unite in anger against you, if you can make them mad at us. But that's not the best. That's not the best. So there's things you can do, and that's what we try to do. So to help coaches understand what the framework allows is a coach to be diagnostic first and then prescriptive. Okay, let's identify, is this a second dimension issue? Is this a first dimension issue? And then develop strategies to address those appropriately. And then the third dimension is the heart. It's that deeper executive center of the being. Its form is the spirit, but its function really is the will. It's the role of the heart that determines what we will value and what we will ascribe worth to. And we know that sport is having a tremendous impact on the heart of kids. But if coaches don't coach these things, what happens is those tend to get coached in the first dimension as well. So the issues are identity, character, significance, self-worth, value, and purpose. And if we don't help coaches, or if we don't help athletes understand that their identity is based on who they are and whose they are and a part of the community and a cause, and that their worth is beyond what they can produce, what happens is kids begin to forge a performance-based identity that, just in terms of performance isn't helpful. You want a kid to perform when the pressure's on. You need to unchain their identity from things that produce an emotion of fear because it's tied to a certain level of expectation or performance. You want your gamers to game, they need to be free of all that and just go be creative. So these are the issues, the first dimension, the second dimension, the third dimension. We want to help coaches with our framework first establish a framework of mindset that therefore empowers them to locate issues where they surface, but then develop appropriate strategies so that we're not trying to fix second and third dimension issues with first dimension strategies.
Coach, that is awesome. Let's do this. There's the whistle. That first question is all done. The kickoff question is done. Let's go with the first drive question. Before we go to the first drive question, Coach, I love how you said the whole thing about running extra, right? Because, I remember writing one time, hey, listen, the youth kid gets it wrong, Coach used to make me run a lap, right, or anybody run a lap. When the kid got back, he still didn't know the answer. The cool thing I like about your analogies is, one, talking about the three pillars, like the triangle you said, the pyramid, with the fundamentals and the bookshelf. That bookshelf, the bottom shelf, needs to be filled up with fundamental stuff. Because here's the thing, not all the youth coaches, but a lot of youth coaches nowadays, they think they might know it all, right? I'm not saying all of them do, but some think they know everything maybe about the thing. What your program does, it takes you step by step to get all the way to the top, and that's heart. And I think that's great. So I just want you to know, I've known your program for a lot of years, but I just want you to know I really appreciate you coming on the show and doing this. Could you tell our listeners what's the website to go to if they want to check it out too?
3dinstitute.com. 3dinstitute.com.
Okay, now, I don't mean that we talk about this all the time with the 3D coaching, but the next question is, again, with 3D coaching, that's okay. The question is this. Absolutely. The one thing I see with all the programs out there, I think you made it too, there's a ton of programs out there. You have this program. It's just like when I'm a teacher, right? Get the next best thing or this or that, right? I like, right. The one thing I took your free course, and we'll talk about that in a second. You guys had a Twitter thing where you had sign up for a survey. But the one thing I liked about it when I took the course was to talk about growth mindset. You know what I mean? And, yes. There was a story that you even did. It was about your team, how they were all together when they were little. And then they got all the way to the end, and they lost that last game. And they were sad, not because they lost, just because their journey ended. I'm not misquoting you, am I? Is that right?
No, that was a story from actually last summer.
Yeah, so like that, I saw that in the video, and it just touched me in a way where it's like, here's the thing with your course, 3D coach, dimensional coaching, you guys even do a thing where you can get teachers and coaches can get CPDUs, I believe, and certification, and even college classes. Is that correct?
Yes, we have really three different versions of our training. We have a version called the 3D Coaching Essentials. That's the one in the month of January that we gave away for people that participated in a research project that we did. It's about 75 minutes. It's just the essentials. It's just the bare bones. What do I need to know to grasp the framework? The next level is actually a certification course, and it's about 7 hours of online training where we help coaches really dive into all the second dimension topics and all the third dimension topics. Not from a, we don't go super deep, but we go pretty deep. It's 7 hours of training. And then we have a course for college credit that really is what Dr. Jeff Duke teaches at the University of Central Florida. I teach it at Northwest Missouri State University. We've got a number of different university partners in their coaching methodology courses that actually use this content and flesh it out over the course of the semester. So it's kind of 3 levels. We've got the light version, youth club travel coaches, volunteer coaches. The course is for anybody, and I think you, as a coach at your level, got a lot out of it, but it was designed for the coaches that may not be coaches by profession. The certification course is, we got a lot of school districts in different states that will allow that for CPDUs, continuing education units, those types of things. And then we offer it for 3 grad credits through our university partner.
Awesome. And the thing with that, so pretty much like what you said is you can do the one course I took was the essential course, I remember. And it was what'd you say, 75 minutes?
Yes.
Yeah, and then what I remember is I took it, started taking it, and then I had to stop because you know how it is. What was me you have 4 kids, I believe you said. I have 5, and it's amazing because something happened, right? The general of the house says, hey, wait a second, I got to go do something, or I need you, so I had to stop that course because the other thing too is all the stories you guys tie into that course. It makes you want to get more, and then like you said, now the college course with the certification and credit. How many hours is that? Because, I know you can do it at certain colleges, but, the online course, how long is that one?
Yeah, we have to justify 45 contact hours.
Gotcha.
For 3 grad credits. It's the same 7-hour course, though. It's just got some extra. It's got some extra reading. What we do is actually after you go through the 3D training, we have coaches dive into Joe Ehrmann's Inside Out Coaching book, which in a lot of ways, takes the whole concept of 3D coaching a lot deeper, and the whole idea of having a transformational purpose as a coach. And that's another resource that I'd highly recommend as a standalone, but it complements our training so well that we actually brought that into the grad class. And then we have a couple writing assignments and a case study at the end that they have to do to basically qualify for the 45 hours. Between you and me and I guess all the listeners, I don't know that it'd actually take that long. It could very easily, but it was designed for coaches with busy schedules. There's not a video in the thing that's over 6 or 7 minutes, so we've dissected it up into bite-sized pieces to fit the busy schedule of a coach.
And that's pretty good too. And that's the one thing. And it's like I'm selling your product for you, right, Coach?
Yeah.
But I mean, honestly, I like it a lot. I think we talked before on Twitter, and I just messaged you. I'm like, hey, do you guys still have some surveys open? Because I wanted to get more coaches that I've known from my coaching tree and from overseas. Hey, go do this, because I just took the 20 minutes of course, and it just a lot of the things resonated with me as a younger coach. And, the older we get wiser, and then we get more stubborn, right? I'll be the first one to admit that. But I think when you look at it and you listen to the videos, it's like, hey, you know what? I can do this better. I can do that better. So I just wanted to say that's really awesome. And then the certification, the course for certification, there's 2 of them, right? There's a 3D. There's only one, right? The course for certification, 3-dimensional coaching.
Yeah, we have 2 versions of that, if that's what you're alluding to.
Yeah. Can you explain those for the listener?
Yeah, so with the certification course, we have a version called 3-dimensional coaching. It's just our standard. If you actually went by the timestamps, it's 6 hours and 45 minutes worth of content. And we also have a version called we call it 3-dimensional coaching plus. And the plus just stands for additional content. And the difference is the core of the training remains the same in both versions. But for coaches who want to opt for a little bit more content, we partnered with our third dimension partner, which is the FCA, the Fellowship Athletes, to expand on our training from a faith-based perspective. So what we did was worked with a bunch of their staff to film short units. They're kind of tag-ons to each of the modules. A lot of times as coaches go through the 3D training, they want to see it through that lens, so we provide that as an option. And then, they're just a great organization that's invested a lot in the development of 3D. They've been a great partner in this whole endeavor, so we're excited to partner with them.
Well, that's awesome. Okay, Coach, there's the whistle. First drive's over. We're going to go halftime, so we're going to let the marching band get on the field. We're going to get off. We'll take a water break, and then we'll game plan for our next thing. Is that okay, Coach?
Yep.
Perfect.
The Big Four, a physical education book written by Coach Anthony Stone, can be purchased through the following locations: Amazon, iTunes, BarnesandNoble.com, and Kobo.
Brunch, $30.
Hey, that's okay, Wendy. That was a good carry. You're still the man. You're the man.
Latte, $4.
Shake it off, Johnny. Rub some dirt on it.
New piano, $3,000.
All right, guys. They're not saying boo. They're saying movers.
Supporting your team. Priceless.
It's all right, Bobby. You still got the best arm in the neighborhood.
There are some things money can't buy. For everything else, there's MasterCard.
This is decaf, right?
We are back from halftime. Coach, did you get enough water?
Yeah, I'm good. I didn't overdo it.
We made our adjustments. We don't have no baseball bat hitting the door like we were talking about earlier. But we'll do this, okay? Coaching youth sports, okay? You said I do it. I love coaching my child. I think it's great to do it. You coach your three boys. You said your wife coaches your daughter. I also coach my daughters in soccer. Even though don't tell the viewers, I just tell them to kick the ball as hard as I can. And I tell them to go to the back cave because my daughter's 5 years old. I said just kick it in the back cave. The joker is the goalie. Kick it past them to get in the back cave, and they laugh. And the kids laugh. But there's a thing I want to do with the question, and I apologize for jumping all around, but there's a thing on your website about it's a gift for administrators and athletic directors, anybody who's responsible for leading coaches within an athletic organization. This could go for either the youth sports, right? So, and I believe it is. Maybe I'm wrong, but Coach, explain what that is. That free gift. It's like 2 hours and 15 minutes long. Can you explain how that will? How that program works? And it's free. I love free. I just want you to know, Wes, I love free. So can you explain that to our awesome listeners, what is that details?
Absolutely. We felt like there was a gap that we needed to fill to help. There's not a lot of training out there for coaches. There's some, and there's becoming more and more, and we're happy about that. We don't see any of these great initiatives that I would describe as a transformational movement in sports to help recover some of the beauty that's been lost in a win-at-all-cost culture, and just there's a lot of great and good that remains about sports. But if we're all honest, there's a lot of things that I think we could do more with them more excellently, if that's a word.
It is now.
Yeah, it is now. And all those great programs and all those great resources, we don't want to compete with any of them. We're on the same team. We're teammates. We're partners in purpose. We're teammates for transformation. But we feel like our deposit is to what I'll describe as the transformational movement of sport, and it harkens back to what I said earlier. We're a framework. We're not an application. We're an operating system, and maybe that's the analogy I'll use right now. I'm on my iPhone right now. This is an operating system. Now, if I wasn't on the phone with you and I was looking at the screen, I'd see lots and lots of applications, lots of apps. There's a lot of great applications out there, and a lot of them are all one good idea at a time, but there's no unifying strategy to it. So this goes back to the idea of the shells too. I'm kind of mixing analogies here, so bear with me. Coaches that coach long enough begin to recognize their need for applications that deal with athletes beyond the physical. We do get more stubborn. I'm with you on that. But we also become more wise, and I think with time we begin to see, man, that just doesn't work like it used to. Or this does work, and I don't necessarily know why, but I'm going to keep doing that. What 3D does is it provides a simple language that helps coaches identify the issues And what it does is it creates a hunger now for applications. A lot of times what happens when coaches go through our training is it exposes the voids in their program. We're doing really good in this dimension. Probably could do better in this dimension. We are doing this over here in this dimension that's really good. In the second dimension, that's why it works. We need to keep doing that. But it exposes some voids there. And then what we find is about 95% of coaches don't have a real clear articulated strategy for the third dimension. In fact, if we go back to the research that Dr. Duke did originally, it was about 75% of coaches were first dimension only. About 15 to 20% of coaches had clearly articulated strategies for the second dimension, and it was only about 5, maybe 10% had strategies for the third. So what happens when people see the 3D framework, the light bulb goes on, and this basic truth comes to light. It's to not coach in all three dimensions, by very definition, is to not get the best of your athletes, because they are three-dimensional, and one dimension affects the other two. So as a framework, what it begins to do is show the voids of where we can get better, and it creates a hunger for applications. Now back to the smartphone analogy. Now I need to download some apps. I'm looking for apps. But first I got to have an operating system. Otherwise, I don't value the apps. That's what we see a lot. There's a lot of great programs, but coaches don't necessarily value them because they don't see how that fits into really what they're already doing. It feels like extra homework or extra, something else that somebody's trying to put on my already full plate, as opposed to, wow, once I understand why I coach and I have this framework called 3D, now I want those applications. So that's our deposit, I feel like. As a framework, we can bring all the good stuff together in a coherent way that really can become open source to people on the back end for training. That's our gift to athletic directors. Most athletic directors don't have a strategy to really hang their hat on as far as how they operate as an entity. In fact, in education, a lot of the feedback we get from administrators is every couple of years it's something new. A principal, a superintendent, somebody will go to a conference somewhere, hear a great speaker. They come back and say, oh, we're doing this now. We're this type of school now. And teachers get tired of that. Coaches get tired of that. What 3D allows is a sturdy framework that doesn't change. Meanwhile, the applications can always be changing because the issues don't change. Motivation, confidence, emotions, team cohesion, goal setting, purpose, identity, significance, self-worth. All kinds of applications can address those issues, but the issues remain the same. Therefore, the framework remains intact. We try to help through our administrators course. We try to help those in authority over coaches understand how this is a framework that can serve you in your quest to fulfill your transformational purpose as a leader of coaches. One of the things we like to help coaches understand is that one coach will impact more people in a year than the average person does in a lifetime. Wow, that's a heavy statement. I believe it's true. What does that mean for an AD if they lead their coaches well? So our heart is not just to reach individual coaches, but empower those in authority over coaches to give them the gift and the training that will empower them to really leave the legacy that we all want to leave at the end of life. That's why we get into coaching.
That is very true, And, to follow up with the question, coaching youth sports, for the listeners out there, what obstacles and those, I call it the priceless moments, like you were just saying, how you're touching all these kids' lives. As a teacher, I do it every day, and I love teaching young kids, older kids, whatever. But can you just dive into a little bit, what's it like coaching in your kids' sports, your son's sports, and is there any obstacles you come across that maybe you can help the viewers with?
I'd say the obvious one is the first dimension. I mean, I started my coaching career at the college level. And I remember coaching my daughter's six-year-old friends in t-ball for the first time, and I thought I was a pretty good first dimension coach until I tried to teach 6-year-olds how to play softball for the first time. And I remember thinking, okay, we're going to start out really simple. We're going to line these girls up. And I gave them some real simple instructions. Okay, I'm going to roll you the ball. I want you to feel it with your glove, and I want you to throw it back to me. Well, the first blow up. She's right-handed, so the glove should go on her left hand. She puts it on her right hand. She scoops it up with her right hand, and she throws it lacrosse style back to me. The ball pops out. The glove comes off and goes about 3 feet. And I thought, okay, we got some work to do here in the first dimension. It's a big difference between 6-year-old girls and highly motivated college athletes. So, but it's important. If we're not going to be good in the first dimension, we're going to have the credibility to capture their hearts and coach them in a way, because we need to help them get. So the biggest challenge I find with coaching youth sports is that you have a limited amount of discretionary time. When you're a high school coach or even a middle school coach, and you've got kids, they're in your environment for the most part a lot of the day. If you're an on-campus coach, or if you're a club and you're dealing with kids year round, you have those opportunities to build a relationship. The biggest challenge with youth sports, at least at the younger levels, is that you're practicing once a week. And if you're not spending the majority of that time on the first dimension, then come Saturday, it's gonna be hard to be successful, and then you start losing kids because they get either really frustrated, or on the other hand, though, it's easy for them to get bored. And when we get if all we do is the first dimension, so there's finding that balance. That's the biggest challenge of how do you keep it fun? How do you infuse the program with joy, yet still get to the arduous task of just mastering the fundamentals, and how that chips away at discretionary time to really teach the life lessons. So you just got to be creative. So there's some simple things that we do that help. They don't take a lot of time, but they make a big difference, and they make a big impact.
Now, let me ask you this question, Coach. I hear it all the time, the parents. What positive things have you dealt with, and is there any story you'd like to share about something to help with parents and things like that?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would share with coaches and parents is that we got to quit looking at each other through our gun sights as enemies and see each other as allies. It's funny, when I do workshops, I'll talk to a group of parents and I'll say, hey, what's the number one problem with youth sports? And you know what their answer is? What is their answer? The coaches. But along with coaches, I say, hey, what's the number one problem with youth sports? You know what they say? The parents. This is, we need to unite in purpose and think about the long-term athlete development that really both of us want for this kid. Now, the problem is we live in a society, there's a lot of problems, but one of the problems is we live in a society that has where the air that we breathe in youth sports is conveying this message to more and more parents, that you've got to start earlier and earlier and earlier. It's more and more competition so that you're ready for the next level, the next level, the next level. And the joy of the process, the joy of the journey gets robbed from kids at younger and younger ages, and it just really breeds transactional relationships. And you got parents now that are investing so much money and so much time in their kids' youth sport journey. My advice to parents is don't ever invest in youth sports. It's a terrible investment. Now, I'm not saying don't give your kid all the best opportunities and spend money and if you value it, but do it for the right reasons, because the reality is about 2% of high school varsity athletes are that age group that will get a scholarship. On average, it'll be less than $11,000 a year. But I read a USA Today stat this past semester that nearly 20% of families in America are spending over $1,000 a month per kid on competitive elite youth sports. And the bubble burst at the end of the road. If you are one of those 2% to get a scholarship, you spent more money in their eight-year-old season than they're going to get on average per year in college. So we're spending $12,000 a year from the age of 6 through 18, and what's the return on that investment? It's terrible. The bigger issue is it breeds a transactional relationship. If I'm investing, what do I expect? A return on that investment. Therefore, when a kid doesn't produce, it's the car ride home that gets expressed. And I submit that what our kids need more than anything is unconditional love from mom and dad. So don't invest in their youth sport journey. Rather, give them the gift of playing youth sports. There's no expectation on a return when you give a gift. That doesn't mean it's not a lavish gift. That doesn't mean you don't spend money and travel and all those things. But it's a mindset thing. And we don't need parents being transactional with kids. We need parents that love their kids unconditionally. So that's the first thing I would say to parents. On the other hand, I think that it's the coach's responsibility to help redefine success for those parents. Even the most overzealous dad, and trust me, I could easily become that myself. It's a constant pressure for me to embody what I know in my heart to believe. I've got all this information and all this knowledge, and it's the curse of knowledge, meaning once I know it, I can't unknow it. But that doesn't make the pressure any less real. When my kid's the one out there and I'm feeling the pressure that he or she perform and all those things that I just talked about. So but here's the point I'm making, even the most overzealous mom and dads that really are driving their kids or driving the youth sport culture, I should say, and just kind of going with the flow of that, behind all of it is a love for their kids. And we got to remember that as coaches. That dad that shows up at 3 o'clock every single day at practice, and you wonder, dude, don't you have a job? How do you get here every day at 3 o'clock? Right? That dad loves their kid, and they want something great for their kid. There's nothing wrong with that. But as coaches, you got to understand, they're coming in to your program with goals that don't necessarily line up with the team goals. They've been taught to think that they're using your program as a stepping stone to the next level that may or may not exist. Probably doesn't for most. So we need to keep the root of their passion in place, which is a love for their kid. But what we need to do is redefine what success looks like. And to me, that's not centered on goals, individual goals or team goals. That's not big enough to sustain it and to bring it all together. What we need are coaches who have articulated their transformational purpose for coaching. And what I find is when a coach can do that, parents buy into that because ultimately that's what they want. They want their kid to be okay in the future.
That's awesome.
And we can provide them that hope, but we got to do the work as coaches to define that in our own life and to be able to articulate that.
There's the whistle. That was a great kickoff return question. Talking about youth sports and going over your administration course. I highly recommend. I have not taken the administration course, but if I took the essentials course and I like that, I guarantee you, any youth program out there, any AD, take the administration course. It's a couple hours long, but it's well worth it, and it's free. So, and it'll dive into more of the 3D coaching. Okay, last question, Coach. We're on the second drive. Last question of the podcast. I had like tons of questions, and then one came to my head about coaches, right?
Uh-huh.
If like you said, something about united, right? And here's what I'm gonna tell you. We're gonna put like hashtag unite all, right? Unite
okay.
all. Parents and coaches. I think that'd be a great hashtag. We could start right now to unite all the parents and youth coaches come together. Because here's the thing too. They have some places in Illinois, and also New York. They're trying to get rid of tackle football from ages 6 through middle school. And that you can't tackle in high school. The biggest thing I think is this, and you said it right now. It's the coaches, if they have that all 3 levels in 3D coaching, I think, and I feel, and I know you probably agree to this because you are 3D and you are the 3D coaching thing. But I think educating the coaches, and plus your program you said has backing, correct? You have like research and all that stuff. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. So the question I have for you is this: if we had more coaches educated, do you think we'd have more problems? Because like back when we were little, we had no problems in football, right? I played at Benedictine College in Atchison, Kansas. I remember playing you guys one time in a JV game. You guys were really tough. But here's the thing. What do you think if we educate the youth coaches more, because some coaches, like you said, they show up at work at 3 o'clock just to coach their kids even, and you're like, how did they get there to watch them? How did they get there to get off work? They're doing it because they love it. How can we help those coaches that don't know a lot about the sport, or just we're using football, for example, right? But that's any sport. How can we educate them better? What's your advice? That's my question. What's your advice to educate those coaches that have to coach their kids' team or have to coach a team, or they won't have a team, if that makes sense? What
I think that, first of all, this really is a good offshoot of the previous question about administrators.
Yes.
Because I think that as administration and people who are allowing coaches to coach kids could do a better job of equipping and what we feel like is important. But this could apply to a head coach, or I think it just applies to any of us who want to be good leaders. That, one of the things we try to help administrators understand is that if you want to create a transformational culture, there's three primary things that you need to provide. The first is you need a baseline of training for all coaches. What's the baseline? What's the baseline that establishes the common framework and the common language? In football, I mean, just if you're the head coach and you hire an offensive or defensive coordinator, and then you staff it with position coaches, what's the first thing you need to do? You need to be able to make sure you're all speaking the same vernacular.
Correct.
You got to all be on the same language.
Yes, that's huge.
It is huge, but there's no language for how to deal with kids beyond the physical. That's what we like to provide, is because we can't think beyond our own vocabulary. Our thought life is hemmed in by the way that we form thoughts, which is by our vocabulary. So what 3D does is it gives you a simple vocabulary that allows you to think in a new way, in a new language where you can share ideas and be innovative. Just like once an offensive staff all speak the same language, innovation goes through the roof. So you need to have a baseline training that all coaches can get. And the second thing you need is ongoing mentoring opportunities. In an age of busyness that we're all in, this is very difficult to carve out the time, but I would submit that I also just made an argument for why it's more valuable than maybe the most valuable thing we can do is mentorship. So you need a baseline of training, you need ongoing mentorship, and then the third thing is you need ongoing resources, again, to stock the shelves and continue to innovate new ideas. So that's one of the things that I would challenge the administrator to provide for your coaches. But back to the thing you talked about earlier is, as coaches individually, we need to be responsible for our own growth and cultivate that growth mindset. One of the things I like to ask coaches, just point blank in our workshops, is, are you coachable and teachable, or are you rigid? I love John Wooden, who famously said, it's what you know after, or it's what you learn after you know it all, that really counts. And that's indicative of an incredibly wise man, well into his 90s, still had this incredible growth mindset, was still learning, was still growing. And what 3D does is basically gives a language to a guy like John Wooden. He was a 3D coach. He wouldn't have called himself that. But so with a growth mindset, what are you doing as a coach to invest in your own development? And what are you doing to help yourself understand the dynamics of why the 21st century athlete's a different breed than it was 2 generations ago? The light bulb may go on. An old school coaching practice, it's not about right or wrong. It's not that that was the wrong way and this is the right way now. That's not it at all. It's just that the culture shifted. And so should you have cared for a kid's heart back in the 80s and 90s or 70s? Yeah, but you didn't have to. It was a different day and age. Kids had so much margin in their life. Mom and dad were home. And they didn't have near the amount of competition that they're exposed to now. And competition drains you down. It's like draining. It doesn't make it bad. It requires recovery. So it's important to understand some of these dynamics that kids have coming into our programs with so little margin in their life. They've been there, done that. They've by the time they get to high school football, they may have had 50 or 60 games in their life already, which is, I don't know, they've calculated. I haven't played a whole lot more than that all the way through college. So things are shifting. Dynamics in the home are changing. There's never been a more challenging time to coach than 21st century. But I hasten to add this. There's never been a more rewarding time to coach either, if a coach can seek out, clarify, define their transformational purpose, and then develop strategies in all 3 dimensions to fulfill that purpose. But it's on each individual coach to invest in their own development. We want to help them do that.
That's awesome. Coach, right there is it. That's awesome. There's the whistle, Coach. That's phenomenal. Before we let you go, Coach, we're at the 2-minute warning. You have how many minutes you want. What parting thought do you want to leave with our viewers? What kind of words of wisdom would you like to leave us with? The floor is yours, sir.
I think that we're at a moment in time where change is needed. Sport, especially the sport of football, has a trajectory that, you just follow that trajectory too long. If something doesn't change, it threatens the whole industry. But it's not, you could take a lot of different areas of different sports and find areas of discontent. But the thing I would like to just leave us with is this idea that talks about how change happens. And it comes from a guy named Gleicher in the 1980s. It was called the formula for change. You can look it up on Wikipedia, the formula for change. This is what he said. Change is a result of this mathematical formula. C equals D times V times Fs, and it's got to be greater than R. Now, if you're a math person out there, you're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Well, let me add a little definition to that. C is change. Change equals, first, discontent. Where there is no discontent, there is no change. Discontent's a starting point, but without the rest, there's no change. That's why it's a multiplication formula. Discontent times vision times first steps. It's got to be greater than resistance. That's how change happens. I think we all have discontent in some form or fashion. Many of us do with the experience of sport in America in this day and hour. If you're not, well, then there's not going to be any change. But that's not enough. You got to have a vision for what it could be. What is the legacy that you want to leave as a coach? What is the preferred vision of the future for this athlete? Is it a partial scholarship at some small school, or is it that they become a flourishing member of society and a transformational leader in their own right, and you made a deposit in that? Is that the vision? If it is, that's good. That means it's not a zero. See, if any of these are zero, the whole thing's zero. It's a multiplication formula. So it's change equals discontent times vision times FS, or first steps. You can have discontent, you can have vision, but if you don't have practical next steps, it's a zero. No change happens. Everything's zero. Well, come back to that. All of that has to be greater than R, which stands for resistance. And in this column, or in this idea of resistance, there's those who can stop it from happening, those that can allow it to happen, and those who can make it happen. So the question I would just submit to coaches, if you have any kind of discontent with the coaching profession, you're getting frustrated, you're frustrated by the 21st century athlete, you have this sentiment that kids just aren't as tough today, there's discontent, but maybe through this podcast you're saying, man, I've got a vision for what it could be. That starts to crystallize in your eyes. That's in your mind's eye. That's awesome. What's your next step? What's your next step or your first step? And I would submit that next step that we need to do as a coaching community is define the why, define our transformational purpose. And then what 3D does is allows us to systematically create a plan to fulfill that. And I think once you find it, and what we find from coaches all over the world that experience our training is once they define and discover their transformational purpose, they begin to enact strategies to fulfill that. It fulfills them. And we get reports all over the world of coaches that this reinvigorates why they got into coaching in the first place. That's what we need. We need coaches that are full of hope, that have hope's function is to empower us in the present. You know, hope in the future will empower us in the present to endure, to pursue, to persist. We need that because this generation of kids needs it. That's what I'm giving my life to inspire coaches to do that. I have great hope in that.
Coach, that's awesome. Coach, that is phenomenal. With that being said, that's the end of the game. Before we thank you again, Coach, I want to thank everybody for listening to the Coach Stone podcast. I want to thank JC Hawks Radio, JC Sports Network. I want to thank Coach Wes Simmons for 3D Coaching to come on Coach Stone podcast. Our next guest will be announced very shortly for episode 6. Coach, before we leave, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for doing this. But before we leave, and then I'll leave with like a last little thing of mine. But please tell everybody the Twitter handle again, and also the website if they want to go to learn more about it and stuff.
Yeah, I would love to connect on social media. Twitter's at 3D Coaches. Number 3, capital D, capital C, Coaches with an ES. At 3D Coaches. We also got a nice little community on Facebook, 3-Dimensional Coaching. It's 3-dimensional, all one word, number 3, capital D, no hyphens or anything. And then our website's 3dinstitute.com. That's where we offer all our various trainings and courses. And as you mentioned, there's some freebies on there too for administrators.
gotta love the freebies, right? All right,
absolutely.
Coach, thanks again for coming on the Coach Stone podcast. I want to leave everybody with this. Always remember, instilling confidence by laying a foundation. That's what my Back to the Basics camps are all about. You know, I definitely want to make sure that I will be definitely, when I'm doing my Back to the Basics camps, I will be, you know, telling everybody, hey, go on 3D coaching, get that free administration class. It's well worth it, and then to see what goes from there. I mean, worst case, it's free for those youth organizations, high school organizations, any sports organization. It'll be great. But that's all for tonight. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great night.
Coach Stone Podcast.